Hello and welcome to Media Monitor, where we analyse the news media both here at home and abroad. And we're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios here in Johannesburg in South Africa on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. I'm Peter Ndoro. Very good morning to you. Now, here's what you can look forward to on the programme today. We're going to be exploring the shocking discovery of a smear campaign against the Sunday Times, which surfaced last weekend. We'll also unpack whether or not the Bosasa company donated 100,000 rands to a fund to help the SABC 8, as was mentioned by former Bosasa COO Angelo Agrizi at the state capture inquiry this week. Now, before we engage with our panel for all of that, let's first take a look at the Sunday newspaper headlines. And we start with the Sunday Times, which says the Sunday Times is leading with a story about how the Watson family was prepared to do anything to keep whistleblower Angelo Agrizi quiet, including offering him up to 80 million rand. The City Press is also carrying a story about how Bosasa boss Gavin Watson allegedly offered 50 million rand in startup capital to his former right-hand man Angelo Agrizi to buy his silence. The publication further states that this offer came 3 days after Agrizi threatened to go public with details of the alleged corruption that took the place during his 18 years at the company. And the Sunday Independent is running with a story about how President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the bill which seeks to regulate public and private funding of political parties. But not all parties are convinced about the timing and intention of the late signing. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Sunday Tribune is leading with a story about how President Ramaphosa wrapped up a visit to India yesterday as a chief guest at its 70th Republic Day celebrations. Cape Town's Weekend Argus is carrying a story about how suspended Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, Nomkobo Jiba, is expected to come under heavy fire at an inquiry into her fitness to hold office. Crossing our borders into Swaziland, Eswatini's Sunday Observer has reported on how founder of the Divine Healing Ministries, Bishop Nash Shongwe, has removed his son, Pastor Skumbuzo Shongwe, from ministering at his church. According to the publication, amongst other reasons, it was informed that his removal was related to marital problems. All right, so Nigeria's Daily Trust is running a story on how the United States government, United Kingdom and European Union observers yesterday expressed concern over the suspension and replacement of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. All right, so that last newspaper, of course, is from Nigeria. And what we're going to do from this week going forwards, we hope to cross to one journalist, editor across the continent each week to give us a sense of what's happening on the ground. And today we start with Chidi Lemchi, who's a political strategist and social commentator, and he joins us now from Nigeria. Chidi, thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program. So take us through...
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
Great. Take us through what you would say are the front page stories in Nigeria today. What have you chosen?
Okay, so for Punch newspaper, well, Punch is reporting that the Senate will reconvene on Tuesday over the matter regarding the sacked CGN, as the Chief Justice of the Federation. A crazy bill to attract 1 year. Now in Nigeria, there's what we call crazy bill, where the power utility company comes into your compound and they just give you any bill that comes into their head as what you should pay for the month. So Nigerians have been complaining that arbitrary billing system should stop. So the National Assembly heeded that call and passed a bill which now stipulates that for every crazy bill that a utility company gives to a customer, that utility company runs the risk of going to jail.
All right.
Article endorsement. alleges Obiano called him an idiot. Saraki it's finished politically, says APC senatorial candidate. Now, Saraki is the Senate president in Nigeria. He's been facing a lot of battles recently from the ruling party, the APC, in his hometown in Kwara State. So the senatorial candidate for his senatorial district is saying that he's finished politically. Okay. Who knows what they have up their sleeves?
All right. What's the other paper saying, right. Chidi? We don't have much time.
All right. So Guardian newspaper is reporting that the US, UK, EU are angry over the manner with which President Buhari sacked the Chief Justice of the Federation. It's important for me to say that what President Buhari did is unprecedented in the history of the country. In fact, a friend of mine yesterday said it's executive recklessness. It has never happened before. He's a dangerous president. And we're hoping that in the coming weeks, he would listen to what the international community and all lovers of democracy across the world and reverse that situation, because it puts the country in a very, very dangerous situation going into the elections, which is about 3 weeks from now.
All right. Chidi, we've run out of time, but thanks so much indeed for giving us your insights, albeit very briefly. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Peter Ndoro. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you. All right, so that is a look at some of our stories and across the continent, and especially that new feature. I'm very much looking forward to hearing voices from across the continent to share their thoughts from the ground in their countries. All right, so we're back to South Africa, and I have some great guests with me today to unpack some of these key stories that we talked about. My guests this morning are the director at the South African Editors Forum, Executive Director Kate Skinner. Thanks very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you.
It's great to be here.
And next to you is Marco Sandile Zulu, who's a digital news journalist at The Citizen. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's your first time, isn't it?
Yes, it's my first time.
Great to have you. We look forward to having you more often.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's delve right into it. The SABC 8 outrightly dismissed claims that it benefited from a 100,000 Rand donation by state capture implicated Bosasa to cover their living expenses while suspended by former SABC COO Claudia Motsoeneng. This comes after a damning publication by Times Live of an article based on what appears to be a leaked email that insinuated that the then Bosasa group of companies may have donated the amount in support of the SABC 8. The South African Editors Forum, SANEF, has since launched an investigation into the matter after initially rejecting these claims. Let's take a look at more into the claims implicating journalists at the State Capture Commission inquiry.
I see there are numbers that are settled. I see 9. Is that the one we must look at for the next person?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. That code is totally different. All right. That is PLS, which stands for Papa Leshabane. That is the director.
Yes.
Okay. So this one's different, as I said earlier. That is 71. And it's got a code behind CCV.
Yeah.
That was a total amount that was given to Papa Leshabane, and from that amount he would pay Zak Medise as well, and he was paying journalists and people from Lindela.
He was paying journalists as well?
Correct.
To do what?
Chair, to give information and to work with them.
Or including writing good stories about Bosasa?
Presumably, yes.
Okay. So
he would get a fixed amount. He would get 71,000 Rand a month.
Yeah.
And he would distribute it. Yeah. And of that money would go to Zak Medise. But we will get to Zak Medise a bit later on.
Okay.
So that was part of it.
All right, so that was Angela Agreasy on the stand there at the State Capture inquiry, talking about how journalists were often approached and given a brown envelope to write positive stories. He didn't, of course, mention directly that Bosasa itself paid into the SANEF fund as much as it was circulated on social media. But to help us unpack this, let's start with SANEF itself. So how did SANEF get into this drama?
So what happened was that there was this story that came out from Times Live, and basically Times Live was saying that, you know, they had seen emails that basically said that 100,000 Rand had been put into this crowdfunding platform that we had set up in 2016. So we set up this platform for the SABC 8 journalists to help them with their legal fees and living expenses when they'd been fired. And these supposedly leaked emails said that Bosasa had put 100,000 Rand into this crowdfunding platform. And but what I think is very interesting, and it was a very good article in The Citizen that came out, and it basically said that it captured the fact that Agrizi said actually that email isn't necessarily correct. It's a fake email. So but anyway, SANEF is saying that just the allegation is such a serious one that what we are doing, first of all, we look through all of those different donations, and most of them are tiny donations. There was only one big donation, and we looked through all of those, and there is no evidence from our side that Bosasa put any money into that crowdfunding platform. But the thing is, obviously, we want to go further than that, and so what we've done is we've got a special auditing company to specifically go through all of those transactions plus looking at our bank accounts. So they are going to go through, you know, that whole period and look through our bank accounts to make sure that you know, who was putting money in.
Okay.
So I think, but I also do think it's very important to say that Bosasa gave money to Kgaudi Motsoeneng, R1 million, in terms of his legal fees. So it's a kind of very interesting contradictory thing, because in fact Kgaudi Motsoeneng was fighting against the SABC 8. So
that on itself was a red flag, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll explore that a little bit further. Magosandile, you wrote about it, and I just wonder, when this story started gathering momentum, as a paper, you looked at it, and what did you decide?
Well, basically, I think the most important thing was to determine if is there any truth to the email, and whether Agrizi did say that there was money deposited by Bosasa. And like my colleague just mentioned here, that we did confirm, and Agrizi cautioned against the fake email, and then he said he believes it could be from the company itself, trying to make him seem as an unreliable source or witness at the State Capture Commission. So I think in that part, by him coming out and saying that it is not true, people then should treat everything that they see around this whole Bosasa scandal with just be careful, because there's a lot of misinformation that's going to come out trying to discredit the one and the other.
So when you read these articles, you hear stories of people, sources in the company say that it did happen, that there was a transfer. Is that all made up?
Well, we can't say it's all made up or not, but I think that point that Agrizi did make, with the company itself is just trying to have a voice or an opportunity and discredit him, is also something that we need to consider, because all these allegations that he's been giving at the commission are very bad for the company, and the media coverage throughout the years about the alleged corruption is not working for it. So it possibly is a campaign by the company just trying to correct the PR or the negativity that has been around
Kate,
them.
You then issued a statement saying, and in there you talk about what you felt might be strategic and deliberate campaign by whoever it is. Take us through that, because I mean this is now starting to sound very sort of Stratcom and Bell Pottinger type tactics.
Yeah, because I mean, for us, we're saying, you know, what is really problematic is once you start to at like a systems level undermine the media and say the media is problematic, and certainly by saying that, you know, the SANEF is getting a huge amount of money from a corrupt company is making the media and the industry look hugely problematic. And so what we're trying to say is that you know, it's very important, as my colleague has said here, to make sure that you look look at all of this different information coming out and check whether it's fake or not. But for us, what was very important was to say, we will absolutely investigate this issue. We will make sure that you know, all of those donations are checked. I mean, we've checked them, but we're not saying, you know, just take our kind of statement about it. Actually, we will get an independent auditor to look at these issues, and then they will come back. So yeah. So what we're needing to do is verify, check. Don't just take things at face value. And I think that's the difficult environment that we're operating in now.
How are we as the media getting caught up in this thing? Because the moment we report on it and talk about it without having checked, it almost becomes truth, and then people at home often are quite lazy to dig and check, and they'll believe 120 characters on Twitter, and then things just get out of hand. A little bit later on, we'll be talking to a young journalist called Farida Joyce who got caught up in this as well. And I just wonder if it's a coincidence that it's all around Bosasa and Sunday Times.
Well, I definitely don't think it's a coincidence, because as the Sunday Times political editor said during the week on a radio interview, that this message by Joyce the fake message started spreading on the Saturday as the newspaper was compiling the report and had sent out questions to those mentioned in the report. So then that itself makes you question what a coincidence, how can this happen at this time? So it definitely looks like the people behind it are trying to take advantage of how the Sunday Times at some point admitted to making a mistake with reports from far back involving the Kaitomena death squad and the deportations of Zimbabwe, all those reports. And then, as well as, if you remember correctly, towards the end of the year, former president tweeted the Sunday Times asking for proof that he owns a mansion in Dubai. So I think people are trying to take advantage of that around the Sunday Times. And then, as well as the fact that they are reporting on Bosasa, just to make like my colleague said, make the paper look like we cannot trust it and discredit the paper. All right,
so we've run out of time in this section, but very briefly, if this is allowed to carry on and media does get discredited, what do you think are the consequences of that?
I think they're absolutely dire. I mean, you know, we need the media, and particularly in an election period, and we need the media to be giving us the information, you know, and because we, you know, general citizens aren't there, I mean, you know, all over the country. So it's to cover the stories, to cover the big stories, to show the different perspectives, and that's the role of the media. But the media has to be seen to be credible, because otherwise those big stories, people are going to say, well, we can't trust the media, and then they might go to social media, and when you go to social media, there isn't any verification there. Yeah.
All right. Okay. We'll continue chatting about many things on Media Monitor, and when we come back, stay with us.
We are outside Layar School, Swaziareneke, where members are picketing against a picture that went viral.
What else do you want to see happen in a country?
Peace, security, and respect of human rights.
It's a bit nervous because it's a new start, it's a new environment.
I'm looking forward to learning new things.
A fuel pump price of $3.11 per litre for diesel and $3.31 per litre for petrol will come into effect.
$121 for only 40 litres.
Ordinary passengers are going to be affected very much.
Traveled 600 kilometers from Harare to Bedbridge to buy only 50 litres of petrol.
This is too much. We are going nowhere.
The police come and started beating the people. Why?
We are fellow citizens. We are going to fight back those police officers. We are not afraid.
The government must step down. Shut down Zimbabwe.
This government has no right to get its citizens into this state. Things have to be corrected.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor now. Fake news is real. And as a young journalist found out this month, it can have quite serious consequences. Now, imagine waking up one morning and finding yourself in the middle of a social media storm because of what people are led to believe are comments that you made about a major newspaper and some political figures, including former President Jacob Zuma. Well, this happened to journalist Farida Joyce, who joins me now to tell us about her fake news ordeal. Farida, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Take us through what happened that morning that you woke up.
Thank you for having me on the show. I received a call from my colleague around, I think it was 12:30, and I was told by her that there was actually an open letter, implications about state capture, ministers. I laughed it off. She then sent me a WhatsApp.
And this open letter is supposedly from you,
Exactly.
sent out to media groups.
Yes.
Yeah?
She sent me the WhatsApp message showing me the open letter that was written. I said to her, where did she actually find the open letter? She indicated that she had seen it on various WhatsApp groups. And that was the first time actually that I had seen or heard of the open letter written in my name.
But then it went viral. I mean, this just took off. And I guess because of the nature of the comments, did people start trying to get hold of you?
Yes, I received a call from the Sunday Times editor. He gave me a call. He wanted to find out if I was the author of the open letter. I indicated to him that I had never written such a letter. I distanced myself from that particular letter. I then said to him that I would actually go out on Twitter, on my Twitter page, and create a post tagging the Sunday Times, refuting that I was the author of the open letter and that it was actually fake news.
All right, because in this letter you were slamming the Sunday Times that when you were working there, that they were forcing you to write negative things about the minister and the president and trying to link it all to Bosasa.
Yes. It's very strange though, because I've actually been unemployed for the last 6 or so months. So I wouldn't even understand why my name would actually be used to supposedly be a Sunday Times journalist. I've never even actually worked for the Sunday Times. I've never been to the Sunday Times offices. So for me, it was actually strange
that you were picked.
That I was picked.
So you did refute it on Twitter, but then this person or this group of people hit back with Facebook.
Yes, after I had tweeted my tweet refuting the open letter, there was actually a fake Facebook account created afterwards saying that my actual Twitter page was actually fake and that it was not me that had said that I had not written the open letter. In the Facebook page, it actually says that I did actually write the open letter and indicating that the ministers would be sued, as well as the journalist who had actually written the Sunday Times article, because she had actually done, I think, a radio interview saying that I had actually said that I had not written the
All right,
the open
so
letter.
then there was a phone number there. People phoned this number. And what did they get on the other side?
One of my colleagues actually did call the number and he answered the call saying that he was Kaya Joyce, a colleague of mine, and I was actually on another call. But what would happen is that as soon as I am done with that call, a message will be passed on to me and I will call her back.
All right, so your identity was stolen and on Twitter, Facebook, it went viral. How did that affect you? What were the consequences?
As a journalist, your credibility is everything. If your credibility is tarnished, the media industry is very small. So if your credibility is tarnished, me being an upcoming journalist, I'm still very, very young in the industry. So for my career going forward, for my future going forward, would be, it's very, very bad.
Do you have any idea who did this?
I have absolutely
no suspicions at all?
No suspicions at all. The only thing that I can think of is I was an employee at ANN7 / The New Age. That was my last employment. So the only actually is that I worked maybe for the Guptas, maybe that's why my name was used. Otherwise, I have no idea why somebody would have chosen my name out of many millions and millions of journalists. Why pick somebody that's barely known in the industry? For me, that's actually shocking and surprising. It's also very sad and heartbreaking as well that people didn't even take the time to just, if you researched my name, if you looked through LinkedIn, you would see that I had only graduated in 2013, have only been working since 2014, and only have 4 years in the industry. The first portion of the open letter states that I worked for 10 years. If people took the time to do a bit of research before retweeting, the situation would have not got as out as it did actually. And it would have not gone viral.
And once again, this is the thing, isn't it? We're too lazy to check. Very simple things, very simple details. She'd never worked at the Star, never worked at the Sunday Times. So whoever set up this fake account really didn't do his homework. And I just wonder, again, your thoughts about the power of the retweet and the destruction that it can cause.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think it's very dangerous, social media at the moment, because people just can easily, with a click, just mess up someone's life like that without them knowing at all. So I think people as end users, also need to take the responsibility and think about the effects this is going to have on the person who's implicated. Because I think it's easier to use maybe trusted sources. If you see just a screen grab or something, and then you retweet without checking yourself, I think you're part of the problem. But if you use trusted sources, maybe trusted publications, and retweet those, at least there was some work put into making sure that this is actually truth.
Sanef, you've got a grouping of editors. Is there no thing that we can do to almost like, as soon as we know something is fake news, that as a grouping you become proactive to dismiss it, because you've got different readers from different spheres, to fix these kinds of things quickly?
Yeah. Look, I think it's absolutely essential. It's something that the industry really needs to look into. And we are actually doing a series of workshops across the country. And one of the big sections of that workshop is looking at what we call disinformation. We don't want to actually use Trump's fake news sort of term. So misinformation, disinformation, and what journalists can do about it. Also, I think that Media Monitoring Africa is doing some very interesting work around actually having like a portal, a place to go if you see disinformation. And they are working with the IEC around this being active during that election period. So if you see something that looks really problematic, you go to that kind of hotline, if I can call it that. And in fact, what they're going to try and do is have takedown. So because I think that particularly during elections, it's going to be so dangerous and so worrying. But I think it's not only during elections. You're absolutely right. We've got to take this issue on head on, and that's probably one of the very important things that SANEF needs to be looking at.
And Farida, it must have been emotionally draining for you. I mean, tell us about how you've been feeling, and has the storm passed, do you think?
Monday was actually the worst. I received calls from colleagues, family.
They couldn't believe what you'd done.
Yes, everybody wanted to actually know if I had written the article, the open letter, and why would I have done such a thing, cautioning me that it could ruin my credibility. And also the sad part about it as well is that my colleagues who worked with me know that I've never been in the industry for 10 years. I don't even think people actually took the time to actually fully read the open letter as well before actually, retweeting and making these accusations and all of this. I don't even think people took the time to actually, it's really sad. It's honestly,
have things calmed down now though?
Yes, things have calmed down. I hope it stays that way. I hope that it doesn't get out of proportion all over again. I'm really hoping that it stays this way.
Frida, thanks very much for coming through and sharing your story with us, because I think it is it's an important warning to us all about the things that we read and see. Be circumspect and look at it a bit more deeply. But we certainly hope that your career takes off now, and we wish you the best of luck. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more on Media Monitor. Stay with us.
When you put 5 girls against 5 guys, of course it's going to be lit.
Andile, what's the next challenge?
Witness all the fun, tension and laughs as we see how well friends know each other to win a luxury cruise. Join us as we bring the excitement every weekend at 6 p.m. only on SABC 1, Mzansi for sure.
So why do you close the door when you mention?
What do you think some of the core functions are of an AME?
How long each of them on the short for? 2 minutes.
Catch Ispani, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. on SABC 1. Mzansi for sure.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, we're going to switch gear a little bit. Earlier on, we spoke to Sanef about the Bosasa affair and the fake emails and so on and so forth. But what we will do now is take a look still with the Bosasa affair, but this time we have a constitutional court judge who was quite upset, actually, about the behavior of journalists, and he felt that they had crossed a line.
I do not know whether the journalists and editors and newspapers who did so believe that it was in the public interest that they publish what Mr. Agrizi was to testify about ahead of him giving evidence about it. I can see nothing that is in the public interest in the publication of what a witness is going to say a few days.
All right, so that was the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, who's of course leading the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and he was upset because newspapers printed evidence that was going to be presented on the following Monday by Angelo Agrizi. Let's join our panel once again. Let me start with you, Kate, because some of these newspapers are part of your grouping. Do you think that the papers, the media, crossed a line? Judge Zondo had rules that he put for this commission, and he says you will not print things before they've been presented in court. Your take?
So we actually met with the Zondo Commission about this very issue, and what we said is we've got to be quite balanced around it. So the issue is around, there's a particular regulation in the Commission, which is 11.3, and it says that, you know, any document that has not actually, you know, been spoken to by the witness, or the witness hasn't talked to the issue, that document, you know, cannot be actually covered or published. But what we're saying, and this is where I think the nuance comes in, is that a lot of documents are already in the public domain. So that's the first thing. So to say that you can't report on any document until the witness has actually, you know, spoken and given their testimony doesn't make sense if the document is already in the public domain. And also, obviously, there are a number of witnesses and organizations that have submissions, and they have put them out immediately. So they haven't actually taken the witness stand, but they have put out their submissions and their versions. And so the you know, so the fact is that all of this information is already circulating in the public domain. So to say that journalists can't be covering stuff which is already out there just doesn't make sense. It's already there on social media. In fact, I think we've got a very important role to actually speak to those issues, and where things are, you know, being manipulated, or, you know, there all kinds of problematic sort of information has been put out there. In fact, I think the media can play a very important role. So I think what we were saying is, when it's already in the public domain, we should be able to cover it. But obviously, we do agree with the Commission that when it's in the investigation phase, then it is very dangerous for any media house to actually get those documents, because obviously, you know, there are various versions, and a very early version will be probably quite different from a later version, and, you know, and it's important that you get the final version and that you're reporting on that. So we've been talking to the Commission about that particular regulation and how do we deal with it. Well, I have to say that they were very positive. They were saying, you know what, we do need to balance things. Open justice requires the media to be able to report, but also the integrity of our work and our investigations also has to be protected. So we're going to have further discussions about that. But the other thing which is very interesting, we were also talking about, because what has also become confused is, when do journalists get that pack of documents? You know, and the issue was that at the end of the witness testimony, they would get the pack of documents. Now, that's very difficult to report on something without the documents. I mean, it's very complex. I mean, you literally pop out to take a telephone call, you miss a piece of what the witness is saying, and you miss a piece of the testimony. Could be very, very important. So what we're saying is that, and I have to say the Commission was really good about this. We were saying, you know, for accredited journalists, they should get the full pack of documents, including all the annexures, and there have been problems about certain annexures not being provided, and they get it at the beginning of the testimony, so that they can report with nuance, with the full facts there before them, so that you get really good reporting on this critical issue. And the Commission was saying, absolutely. But the interesting thing, of course, then is about embargoes. It's to say, you can't, obviously, you've got all the documents, you read them, you're thoughtful about them, but you can't release those documents until the end of the testimony. And that is journalist practice. When you think of SONA, State of the Nation address, the budget, journalists do get the documents in advance.
And get locked up in a room sometimes.
Exactly. And so we were saying, of course, we would have to have that kind of level of trust, that we get the documents, but we don't immediately put them online.
All right. So your gut feeling when you heard the judge speaking, because, you know, the layperson at home is listening to this judge and they're thinking, the media, they're misbehaving to try and sell newspapers, as the judge was alluding.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like my colleague just said, well, my thought about this whole thing is that it is important that journalists have that information so that they can provide background and the history and all, because the Bosasa story has been reported on for years. So like she said, you sometimes get the problem, you're watching the state capture inquiry, and just like she said, a phone call, you miss out on something important. But if you have the documents, you can reference on the documents and just make sure that we remain factual and don't veer off. So I get the regulations, but maybe let's see what happens with the discussions and what agreements are reached between SANEF.
So let me play devil's advocate a little bit here, because we're in the world of fake news, and very clever people can create documents that purport to be affidavits, and the media can get sucked into this thing. And maybe that's the danger, where you think you've got something genuine, you think you've got something authentic, you print, and then on the Monday the guy says, no, I never said that. Is that maybe a danger that we need to be aware of?
So it's very interesting that you're actually raising that question, because in fact we discussed this very issue with the Zondo Commission, and they were saying it's so dangerous. Not only do you get sometimes the wrong version or like an early version of a document, but sometimes actually people have manipulated the document, which is even more dangerous, to put in different facts, different names or whatever. And so one of the things we talked about was the fact that, you know, we want to be able to verify versions of documents with the Commission, so that when we as the media report on these documents, we know which version we're working with. And I think that that is something which is so important. And I think that a good relationship between SANEF and the media and the Zondo Commission, which is what we've talked about, and that's what we're hoping is, you know, going forward we're going to have, that one of the really important things that we can do is to say, look, this document is circulating on social media. You as a commission can verify for us, is this in fact the final version, you know, and has it been manipulated?
All right, okay, I'm going to move away from this subject now, because I think we've kind of dealt with it. So the other thing is we've got, and I was listening to the radio just now, and the talk show, somebody phoned in and said, you know, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa with his entourage going to sell the good story of South Africa to all this international people. He's only got 2-3 days to do it. And yet, when he gets there, he has to fend off questions about corruption and so on and so forth. And so this listener said, but hang on, why don't the papers talk up South Africa more, so that by the time he gets there, positive news is there? And this is an interesting dilemma, because without, I mean, if we look at the front pages of our papers today, we might not have known about state capture had we not reported on it. Is there a country duty for newspapers to help missions like President Ramaphosa's country duty?
Well, the way I see it is that we can't not report on certain things. If there's corruption, we have to report on it. And then the important thing about the papers, whether there's a good news story or bad news story, let's put it out there for the public. But I think reporting on all this corruption is just helping. It should help the president or the presidency in showing that the country is working towards fighting that corruption and maybe removing the corrupt elements within government, because as it's called the new dawn. So maybe us showing all these state capture allegations should be a sign that these newspapers are part of this movement towards a new dawn in South Africa and weeding out corruption.
Kate, is it that this papers genuinely don't try and look for headline grabbing positive stories, because these other ones so much more juicier?
Look, I mean, I think the media across the world will talk about bad news, because that is something that I think we're programmed to as human beings. You know, we're much more anxious if there's some bad news, then we need to pay attention and do something about it. But I think it wouldn't be true to say that the media across the world doesn't look for good news stories, because I think there are you know, all kinds of different media outlets that do. So often they'll end a bulletin with you know, good news. And I mean, I was thinking about, for instance, the Thai public broadcaster literally goes out of its way to make sure that they always find a few good stories and make sure that they're part of the news. So my sense is that, you know, I think what we want to do as a media is to reflect reality, and reality reflects some really good things, because I mean, I think there's some amazing things about living in South Africa, and the very fact that we are so transparent. I think we're probably one of the most transparent countries in the world, and there's got to be something good about that. And maybe we should be emphasizing more as a media that, of course, all of this material is coming out. It feels terribly depressing, but wow, the fact that we are looking at this stuff really gives us the possibility to deal with it, and that's got to be a good thing.
So again, I'll come back to you, and I just wonder, when I go through my life, I would say that most of my life is quite pleasant. Most of my life is actually quite good, and a smaller portion is negative. But when I read the papers, it seems the balance is the other way. So is there a case that actually the more we do the negative, the more we believe that that's the general lay of the land? An example, Fahrenheit 9/11, Lake Michigan, Canada to the north, America to the south, and the gun crime in America was higher than Canada, even though there are more guns per capita in Canada than in America. And the producer of the movie said that that was because there was more positive news on Canadian television than in America.
Yes. The thing is, though, the real problem, yes, I've actually thought about this before when it comes to protests, for example. I have to state this, though. I'm not saying protests should not be broadcast. But you find, we've seen last year where one community starts protesting and then there's intervention from government officials. Then other communities say, oh, maybe that works. Let's try it too. But we had to report it. And where do they see it? They see it in the media. So maybe it does influence that. But at the end of the day, most of these stories are about our government, which is handling public money. So it is important that we report on this so that people know which officials to trust, which officials should be held accountable. Yes.
All right. Today is the last day, voter registration. And what we know for sure is that young people are unlikely to vote in the numbers that we had hoped. And yet they're the most disaffected, the most unemployed, and the most seeking help. But for some reason, they're not going to register to vote. How culpable is the media in terms of, again, country duty, educating people about the power of voting, the value of voting? Okay?
So I mean, I think absolutely the media has an absolutely critical role, and in fact the public broadcaster has a particularly important role in terms of educating people about it and giving them a sense of the fact that it makes a difference. I think that's the big issue, is if you feel that it's not going to make a difference, then why would you bother? And I think maybe one of the problems is that we have this election period where it's announced when the elections are actually going to be, and almost like everybody is gearing up for that election period. But I think that what we should do going forward is that we should have a much longer period, which is before that so-called election period, which is kind of a legal period, where we do a lot more education. And I think that would really help. And I think the public broadcaster particularly needs to play an important role there.
All right, you're a digital journalist,
yes,
and this is where the young people consume their news. They're not picking up these physical papers like me, with the grey hair. Do you think that you did enough to talk directly to young people, or do you talk generally, and this is why we've lost them?
I think maybe we just spoke generally, to be honest. But then again, maybe the youth themselves are not really interested in elections and voting. Maybe they're put off by all these headlines, corrupt officials are still being voted back into. Maybe how does it help? How does voting help? So maybe that's the other problem. It might not necessarily be media's lack of attention towards the youth, might be just them not being interested in elections anymore and not having faith in the power of the vote.
So should we be talking to them in a different way, because they are the majority of the population now, and that maybe the way we write and engage is what's wrong?
So I mean, I was very interested when I saw the IEC basically launch, and they had this fantastic kind of campaign with XE, which I thought was really, really fun and funky. And the particular agency that was running it was like funky, young, black. I mean, they were, they really reflected like who our youth are. And I think that maybe we need to do a lot more in terms of that. And I do think that there probably are other ways of putting across information that would make it more interesting, because I don't think the youth are completely disinterested. I think they are interested on issues, but you've got to put it and package it in different ways. But I don't know what my colleague would say. But I think you could, and maybe we haven't focused enough on that.
On packaging.
Packaging it in a kind of more exciting way. And I think there's some very interesting issues about the environment and science-related issues and things which I think the youth are probably more excited about, and yet those are things which could be part of the elections, particularly environmental policies and those kinds of things.
Yes, I agree on that one.
All right, okay, I'm going to leave that, and I'm hoping that people at home who haven't registered, that they do, because it is your country duty. But newspapers, we started with the headlines, and I just want perhaps to ask you, is there any particular story that grabbed your attention that we might look at right now? Let's start with you, Marcos Andy.
Yes, I saw this story on page 2 of the City Press, ANC's Bosasa hot potato. But in the story is basically talking about how the ANC is going to have a vetting process for those who will be on the list to be sent, the party's list for those who will be sent to Parliament.
Okay.
So I think this should be an opportunity for the ANC.
All right, so this is the story that's grabbed your attention, is it?
At the bottom, yes.
Okay. So again, you know, especially when we're getting through to this election period, these kinds of stories become more and more important, don't they?
Yes, yes,
yeah?
That's very true.
Okay, all right, fantastic. What about you, Kate? Is there something that grabbed your attention?
So I was very interested in this uproar
this
over
is the front
political...
page of the Sunday Independent.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So I was particularly interested about this uproar over political party funding. And I know that civil society has said it's absolutely important for it to be transparent, you know, who is funding our political parties. And in fact, this bill has now been signed and has become law. But of course, there's a lot of controversy still around the timing of that, saying, you know, it's too late. It's not actually going to impact on this election. But I think going forward it will, and I think it will be positive. But again, there's a nuance to this, because what I find interesting is that some of the smaller parties are saying, you know, actually, if it's known who is funding them, so for instance the DA is saying it, they might be anxious and say, no, we don't want to fund you because we'd rather be seen to be funding the more powerful, like for instance the ANC. So they have put a bit of a nuance on that one. But overall, I think this is very positive, and I wish it had just been signed in earlier. So
are we now starting to fall in line with other countries in the world, or where are we in terms of the way it's been written at the moment, this law?
I think like my colleague said, it is a good thing that is happening, because then questions around whether your funders are influencing your party policies and all of that will also help voters know. Maybe let's say Babu Ndoro is funding my party. Does Babu Ndoro, is he trying to push an agenda within my party?
But PR now might become the issue, isn't it? I mean, let's take a controversial party like BLF.
Yes.
So somebody might want them there because they agitate and they, you know, but now you might not be so keen to donate to them because you don't want to be seen to be supporting their ideas. So the smaller parties who might be quite radical might disappear as a result of this.
Yes, and I mean, I think that's what they're basically putting on the table, the issue that they particularly might be undermined through this. I mean, I think that with anything, there's always a balance. But my sense is that overall, I think the balance is on the right side, rather to know. And I think that that's best practice internationally.
And I suppose the good side of it is that if somebody is playing politics, in other words, funding troublemakers just for the sake of it, this will put an end to it.
Yes, like I said, it will be more transparent, and then we will know exactly if any funders do have an influence in our policy, in our politics as well. I think that's also very important.
Okay, so the week ahead, what do you think is going to be making the front pages of the headlines? Do you think Angelo Agrizi is going to drop some more names? Agrizi, they say, has been dropping files. I think that's what we expect, and then we'll see exactly which names now will be implicated, and everyone is keeping an ear to find out which other minister, which other politician. So I think Agrizi, yes, will definitely take the lead come Monday, and then until he's done with his testimony. What else might come up?
So, I mean, being kind of quite selfish and just thinking specifically about the media, what we're hoping is, like in the week that comes up, that we actually finalise some of the issues around that particular regulation of the Zondo Commission, around you know, can we use the documents in the public domain, and kind of coming closer, because I think that's very important. So that's what we're
And there's some
for.
journalists who are crossing their fingers that they're not hashtagged this week and named as potentially having received money during the course of the Bosasa experience.
But that's what we want. We really want those names so that we can look back at past stories and determine, was this PR paid for by Bosasa? And we can know which people to trust, which media houses to trust. And that's very important.
I would completely agree with my colleague. I think, and Sanef has said very strongly, you know, we welcome an investigation around this, because at the moment there's just a dark cloud over us, and knowing those names will certainly help. And we don't want to protect, brown bag journalism.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You've been great guests. Thank you for your insights. For you at home, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you at the same time next week for more of the same. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Legal hassles?
Clientele legal!
That's it. We lost. Problems with the neighbors?
Clientele legal!
Rental disputes? Advice on maintenance matters? Drawing up a will?